I'm Mason Thompson, 34, and I've always been the family ATM. Last Saturday at my niece Bailey's birthday party, I handed her the $850 phone I'd worked overtime to afford. She giggled while unwrapping it. Mom says if you disappeared tomorrow, no one would even notice. 40 guests erupted in laughter. I didn't. Something inside me finally broke as I watched her casually toss aside the gift bag. I nodded, my decision made. Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from and hit that like and subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to see what happens when someone finally vanishes from a family that takes them for granted. The drive home from Bailey's party felt longer than usual. My knuckles turned white as I gripped the steering wheel, replaying Bailey's words over and over in my head. If you disappeared tomorrow, no one would even notice. The casual cruelty of it burned, but what hurt more was realizing she hadn't come up with that on her own. My sister Kimberly had said it first. I'd been supporting Kimberly's family for nearly 7 years now. It started when her husband Greg lost his job at the manufacturing plant that closed down in 2018. What was supposed to be a temporary helping hand had morphed into complete financial dependency. At first, it was just helping with groceries and Bailey's school supplies. Then it became their mortgage when they were 3 months behind and facing foreclosure. Next came the car payments when Greg's credit tanked. Eventually, I was covering everything from their utilities to their cell phone plans. The irony wasn't lost on me that Bailey was making that comment while activating the phone I had just bought her, the latest model that even I couldn't justify purchasing for myself. My own phone was 3 generations behind, the screen cracked in one corner, but it worked fine. I didn't need the latest and greatest. I lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment, while Kimberly and her family lived in a 4-bedroom house in the suburbs that I was paying for. My parents knew about the financial support I provided, but even they had started to take it for granted. Dad had retired 5 years ago, and their fixed income wasn't enough to cover Mom's medication after her diabetes diagnosis. So I started covering that too. Monthly transfers to help them stay afloat had become as routine as paying my own bills. Last Christmas, I'd spent nearly $3,000 on gifts for everyone, thoughtful things I knew they wanted but couldn't afford. Kimberly got the designer purse she'd been eyeing all year. Greg got the golf clubs he'd mentioned once in passing. Bailey got the tablet she needed for school and the fancy headphones all her friends had. My parents got the all-expenses-paid weekend at the mountain resort they'd always talked about visiting. What did I get? A $25 gift card to a coffee shop and a mug that said, "World's okayest uncle." It sat in my cabinet and used. I never got married or had kids of my own. There had been women I dated seriously, Rachel for 2 years, then Julia for almost 3. Both relationships ended for the same reason. They couldn't understand why so much of my income went to supporting my sister's family. It's enabling them, Julia had said during our final argument. They'll never learn to stand on their own as long as you keep catching them. I had defended my family then. They're going through a rough patch. Family supports family. 7 years is one hell of a rough patch. Last month, when Bailey needed braces, guess who paid the $5,800 that insurance wouldn't cover? When Greg needed a reliable car for his newest job prospect, guess who put down the $4,000 deposit? When Kimberly wanted to renovate their kitchen because the old one was depressing her, guess who funded it? And through it all, I lived frugally. My furniture was second-hand. I meal prepped simple dishes to save money. My one indulgence was my computer setup for gaming, the one hobby I allowed myself. Even then, I waited for sales and built it piece by piece over time. At Thanksgiving last year, Kimberly had made a joke about my apartment. "I don't know why you live in that shoebox when you make so much money. It's like you enjoy being miserable." Everyone laughed. I laughed too. But something ached inside me. I didn't tell her that if I lived in anything nicer, I wouldn't be able to pay her mortgage. 2 months ago, My parents celebrated their 40th anniversary. I arranged a surprise party, catering, decorations, and a video compilation of messages from friends who couldn't attend. As everyone ate the food I'd paid for and drank the champagne I'd provided, my mother hugged me and said, "You're such a good son. Always so reliable." It was the closest thing to thanks I'd received in years. And now here was Bailey, parroting her mother's words. That if I disappeared, no one would even notice. As I pulled into my apartment complex, I sat in my car for a long moment, engine off, staring at nothing. A text came through from Kimberly. "Bailey loves her new phone, but she's already asking about AirPods to go with it. Her birthday money from Mom and Dad won't cover it. Any chance you could help out? Hugs and kisses." No, thank you. No acknowledgement of the expensive gift I'd already given. Just another request. I didn't respond. Inside my apartment, I kicked off my shoes and loosened my tie. The place was quiet. Clean. But impersonal. No photos on the walls. Nothing that really said who I was. Maybe that was fitting for someone who could disappear without being noticed. I poured myself 2 fingers of whiskey and sat at my kitchen table, opening my laptop. Almost on autopilot, I logged into my banking portal. There they were, all the automatic payments scheduled for the coming month. Kimberly's mortgage. My parents' support. Bailey's phone bill. Greg's car payment. The utilities for their house. The monthly transfer for incidentals. Together, they consumed almost 70% of my take-home pay. I took a slow sip of whiskey and felt the burn down my throat. Maybe Julia had been right all along. The apartment felt emptier than usual that night. I'd lived here for 8 years. Yet it never really felt like home, more like a place I kept my things while I worked to support everyone else's homes. The walls were bare except for a generic landscape print I'd bought at a discount store to break up the monotony. No family photos. Those lived on my phone, rarely looked at. I finished my whiskey and poured another. Not my usual habit, but tonight called for it. The second glass sat untouched as I scrolled through my bank statements from the past year. The numbers were staggering when viewed all at once. $24,000 for Kimberly's mortgage. $9,600 for my parents' monthly support. $7,200 for Greg's car and insurance. $5,800 for Bailey's braces. $12,000 for the kitchen renovation. $4,000 for Greg's car deposit. $3,000 for Christmas gifts. $2,400 for Bailey's private soccer training. $1,800 for Kimberly's mental health getaway with her friends. The list went on and on. Over $70,000 in a single year, gone to support people who joked about my disappearance. I opened another tab and checked my retirement account. It was barely funded. At 34, I should have had far more saved, but every time I tried to increase my contributions, some family emergency required my financial attention. My phone buzzed again. A text from my father. "Your mother's medication cost went up again. Can you increase our monthly by $200? Thanks, son." No. How are you? No. Sorry to ask? Just another financial request. I set the phone down without answering and returned to my laptop. A memory surfaced from 3 months ago, Bailey's school concert. I'd taken time off work to attend. Sitting in the auditorium alone while Kimberly and Greg sat with other parents they knew. When I tried to join them after, Bailey had introduced me to her friend as my mom's brother. Not even my uncle. Afterward, I'd driven them all to dinner. Paid, of course. My phone rang. Kimberly. I let it go to voicemail. But she called again immediately. With a sigh, I answered. "Mason, did you get my text? About the AirPods?" Her voice had that familiar tone, the one that expected compliance. "I got it," I said flatly. "So, can you help out? Bailey's been talking about them nonstop. They're only about $300. Only $300. On top of the $850 I'd already spent. Did you like the party? She asked, filling my silence. I thought it turned out great. Though the cake wasn't as good as last year's. The bakery charged more too, can you believe it? I'd paid for the cake. And the venue. And the decorations. Kimberly. I interrupted her chatter. Did you tell Bailey that if I disappeared, no one would notice? The line went quiet for a beat too long. What? No. I mean, maybe as a joke? Come on, Mason, don't be so sensitive. It was just girl talk. Girl talk that she repeated in front of 40 people while opening the expensive gift I bought her. She's 13, Mason. Kids say stupid things. Don't take it personally. But it was personal. It was the most personal thing imaginable. I've got to go, I said. So about the AirPods. I hung up. The whiskey remained untouched as I opened my banking app again. With methodical precision, I began canceling every automatic payment to my family. One by one, I selected each recurring transfer and deleted it. The mortgage. The utilities. The car payment. The incidentals fund. My parents' support. All of it. 2 final taps confirmed the changes. Done. My phone immediately buzzed with a notification from the bank confirming my changes. It would buzz again tomorrow when the scheduled transfers failed to process. And it would likely buzz nonstop after that with panicked messages from my family. I turned it off. For the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. The crushing weight of obligation lifted, if only for a moment. I knew it wouldn't last. There would be consequences. Angry calls. Guilt trips. Accusations. Unless I simply wasn't there to receive them. The thought came unbidden, but once there, refused to leave. What if I actually disappeared? What if I proved Bailey and Kimberly right but also wrong? What if I vanished and they noticed very much indeed? I opened my laptop again, but this time navigated to a blank document. At the top, I typed, "Exit strategy." Under it, I began to make a list. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. My boss, surprised, didn't question it. I had enough accumulated sick leave to last months if needed. I wouldn't need months. I'd need days, maybe a week at most. My phone remained off. The silence was both unnerving and liberating. No demands. No expectations. No one asking for money or favors or time. The exit strategy document had grown overnight into something real and actionable. I wasn't running away in panic or spite. This would be calculated, methodical, and complete. First, I needed cash. My bank accounts would eventually be traceable, but having liquid funds would give me flexibility in the immediate future. I withdrew $5,000 from my savings, enough to get established somewhere new, but not so much that it would trigger automatic reporting. Next, identity. I wasn't planning to change my name legally. That would be complex and potentially criminal. But I needed to go somewhere no one would look for me and start fresh. I researched small to mid-sized cities with growing tech sectors where my skills would be marketable but that were far from anyone who knew me. Portland, Maine caught my eye. East Coast. Smaller tech scene than the West Coast hubs, but growing steadily. Nearly 3,000 miles from my current life in Arizona. I booked a one-way flight for the following day using a travel site I'd never used before, paying with a credit card I rarely touched. The black backpack was new, purchased in cash from a big box store. Into it went only the essentials, a few changes of clothes, basic toiletries, my laptop, chargers, and important documents like my birth certificate and social security card. I left my gaming rig untouched. It would be too much to take, too identifiable. I created a new email address. One not linked to my name but professional enough for future job applications. I purchased a prepaid phone from a convenience store, again paying cash. The phone would serve as a clean break, No one from my past life would have this number. That afternoon, I visited a notary and had a simple letter drawn up. I, Mason Thompson, being of sound mind, have decided to leave my current life behind. This is not a cry for help or cause for concern. I am safe and acting of my own free will. I release all claims to the property in my apartment and authorize its disposal after 30 days from this date. I signed it, had it notarized, and placed it in an envelope along with a USB drive. On the drive, I had compiled a folder of PDFs, every receipt, every transfer, every financial contribution I had made to my family over the years. Meticulous records that totaled $346,927. 18 over 7 years. Nearly $350,000. Enough for a down payment on a beautiful house. Enough to fund a substantial retirement account. Enough to change my life. Instead, it had maintained theirs. I didn't include a vindictive note or angry message. The numbers spoke for themselves. The next step was my apartment. I paid my landlord for the remaining 3 months on my lease, plus an additional month as a courtesy. I explained I had a sudden job opportunity out of state and needed to leave immediately. He was surprised but accommodating, especially given the additional payment. My final day at work would be conducted remotely, the sick day excuse extended to working from home. I would tie up loose ends, complete outstanding projects, and submit a formal resignation letter at the end of the day, citing personal reasons and offering 2 weeks' notice that I knew they wouldn't require me to fulfill given my accumulated vacation time. That night, I walked around my apartment one last time. It struck me how little of me was actually here. No decorations that couldn't be purchased from a catalog. No personal touches beyond basics. My life had been on hold for 7 years while I funded everyone else's progress. The backpack sat by the door, packed and ready. The notarized letter and USB drive were inside a larger manila envelope that also contained my apartment keys. This would be left with the landlord in the morning, with instructions to give it to my sister when she inevitably came looking for me. I slept surprisingly well that night, better than I had in years. There was a clarity in decision and action that had been missing from my passive support role for too long. In the morning, I took one last shower in the apartment, dressed in comfortable clothes suitable for travel, and took a final look around. There was nothing left I needed, nothing that couldn't be replaced. I shouldered the backpack, picked up the manila envelope, and walked out, locking the door behind me for the last time. The landlord's office was just opening when I arrived. I handed him the envelope with brief instructions, thanked him for being a good landlord, and left before he could ask questions. At the airport, I switched my phone back on long enough to send a mass email to my work colleagues, thanking them for the years together and explaining I had to leave due to a family emergency. Technically not a lie. Then I shut it off again, removed the SIM card, and dropped both into a trash can near the security checkpoint. As the plane took off, lifting me away from the life I'd built and the family that had drained it dry, I felt a curious mixture of grief and release. I was leaving behind relationships built over decades, but they had become so unbalanced, so one-sided, that they barely resembled true connections anymore. Bailey's words echoed. If you disappeared tomorrow, no one would even notice. They would notice. The question was what they would learn from my absence. Portland in late spring was nothing like Arizona. The air had a crisp, salt-tinged quality that filled my lungs with each breath, making me feel more awake than I had in years. The city sprawled along the coastline, historic brick buildings mingling with modern structures, all overshadowed by an impossibly blue sky dotted with seagulls. I checked into a modest motel near the downtown area, paying cash for a week up front. The room was clean but basic: a bed, a desk, a bathroom, and a small kitchenette. It wasn't luxury, but it was anonymous, and that was what I needed most. For the first 3 days, I did nothing but explore the city on foot. I walked the cobblestone streets of the Old Port District, ate fresh seafood at small local establishments, and sat on benches overlooking Casco Bay, watching fishing boats bob on the horizon. No one knew me. No one made demands. No one expected anything. It was intoxicating. By the fourth day, I was ready to start building something new. I found a small apartment in a converted industrial building on the outskirts of the Arts District. The landlord, a gruff older woman named Doris, seemed suspicious of my lack of rental history but was mollified by my offer to pay 3 months in advance. She didn't ask many questions after that. "Apartment 3C," she said, handing me the keys. "Laundry's in the basement. No pets, no smoking, no loud music after 10. Any problems with the plumbing, let me know immediately." "Thank you," I said, taking the keys. They felt heavy in my palm. Substantial. A tangible beginning. The apartment was sparse but had character. Exposed brick walls, tall windows, hardwood floors worn smooth by decades of use. It came partially furnished with a bed, a couch, a dining table with 2 chairs, and a desk. More than enough to start with. I set up my laptop on the desk and began the job search. My resume was strong, 15 years of software development experience with a focus on financial systems. I removed specific company names and used my new email address, but kept the technical details intact. Within days, I had 3 interviews scheduled. I took the job that offered the quickest start date, even though it paid significantly less than my previous position. Software developer at a small startup creating inventory management systems for local businesses. The team was young, energetic, and didn't ask too many personal questions. I was the quiet, experienced developer who kept to himself, a role they seemed to expect and respect. My new routine was simple but satisfying. I walked to work each morning, stopping at a corner cafe for coffee. I contributed my expertise during the day, helping the younger developers solve problems they hadn't encountered before. In the evenings, I explored different parts of the city or read books in my apartment. On weekends, I took longer walks along the coast or visited local markets. The apartment slowly began to reflect my presence. I bought a proper coffee maker. Added a bookshelf filled with titles I'd always wanted to read but never found time for. Hung a local artist's painting of the Portland headlight on one wall. My first real decoration in years. Bit by bit, I was building a life that was actually mine. 6 weeks after arriving, I met my neighbor across the hall, Martin, a retired English teacher who had moved to Portland after his wife passed away. We began nodding to each other in the mornings, then exchanging brief pleasantries, and eventually having actual conversations in the hallway or the building's small courtyard. "You're from the Southwest, aren't you?" he asked one evening as we both checked our mail. "I can hear it in your vowels." I tensed momentarily, then relaxed. There was no suspicion in his tone, just friendly observation. "Arizona," I admitted. "Needed a change of scenery." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. Sometimes a fresh start is the only way forward. After Eleanor died, I couldn't bear our house anymore. Too many memories in the walls. He tapped his mailbox thoughtfully. "Portland's good for fresh starts. Nobody bothers you, but nobody leaves you entirely alone either." That seemed accurate. People here were friendly but respected boundaries. I'd begun to recognize the barista who made my morning coffee, the owner of the bookstore I frequented, the older couple who walked their corgi past my building each evening. Small connections, no expectations. One Saturday morning, I was returning from the farmer's market with a bag of fresh produce when I noticed a teenage boy sitting on the steps of our building, fiddling with what looked like a broken drone. He glanced up as I approached, frustration evident on his face. "Having trouble?" I asked, pausing beside him. "The motor's fried, I think," he said, turning the device over in his hands. "Saved up for months and crashed it on the first flight." I set my grocery bag down and held out my hand. "Mind if I take a look?" I'm pretty good with electronics. He hesitated, then handed it over. I'm Jake. Apartment 2A. My mom and I just moved in last month. Mason. 3C. I examined the drone, identifying the issue quickly, a loose connection rather than a fried motor. I think we can fix this. Do you have a small screwdriver set? Jake's face lit up. Yeah, upstairs. You really think it can be fixed? Pretty sure. Let's find out. That afternoon spent repairing Jake's drone led to an unexpected mentorship. He was bright but struggling in school, particularly with math and science. When his mother Lisa learned I was a software developer, she cautiously asked if I might be willing to tutor him occasionally. I agreed, surprising myself with how quickly I said yes. Twice a week. Jake came up to my apartment where I helped him with algebra and basic programming concepts. His quick mind and genuine curiosity reminded me of myself at that age, before family obligations had consumed my identity. You're really good at explaining this stuff, he said one day after successfully completing a small program we'd been working on. Way better than my teachers. The compliment warmed something in me that had been cold for a long time. Out of habit, I checked news from Arizona occasionally. 3 months after my departure, a small local piece caught my eye. Kimberly and Greg's house was being foreclosed upon. The article didn't name them, but the address was unmistakable. I felt a twinge of guilt, quickly replaced by resolve. They were adults. They would figure it out, just as I had figured out how to build a new life from scratch. I closed the browser and returned to the book I was reading, no longer allowing my thoughts to drift backward. 3,000 miles away. My disappearance had detonated like a bomb in my family's carefully constructed reality. I didn't witness it firsthand, of course. But Martin, my retired English teacher neighbor who had become something of a confidant, had a sister who worked for a skip tracing company. With her help, I was able to piece together what happened in the weeks and months after I vanished. The first sign that something was wrong came the day after I left, when the automatic mortgage payment for my sister's house failed to process. Kimberly, assuming it was a banking error, tried calling me repeatedly. Each call went straight to voicemail. By the third day, with multiple payments now having failed and still no word from me, she drove to my apartment. The landlord met her in the parking lot, having been instructed to watch for her arrival. He handed her the manila envelope. Her confusion turned to panic as she read the notarized letter declaring my intentional departure. The USB drive was worse. Back at her house, with Greg and Bailey hovering anxiously nearby, she plugged it into their computer. The folder opened to reveal hundreds of PDFs, every financial transaction I had made on their behalf for 7 years. Each one labeled, dated, and categorized. The total sum glared from a spreadsheet on the main page: $346,927.18. What does this mean? Bailey had asked, peering over her mother's shoulder at the screen. Where's Uncle Mason? Kimberly had no answer. They filed a missing person report the next day, but the police, upon seeing the notarized letter, classified it as a voluntary absence. No crime had been committed. I was an adult who had chosen to leave. The financial impact hit like a tsunami. Within 2 weeks, they received notice that their mortgage was delinquent. The power company sent a warning that service would be disconnected if payment wasn't received. Greg's car loan company called about the missed payment. Bailey's phone service was suspended. My parents, too, found themselves suddenly without the monthly support they had come to depend on. Dad had to return to work part-time as a night security guard at a local warehouse, a physically demanding job for a man in his 70s with arthritis. Mom had to switch to generic medications and cut her doses to make them last longer. Kimberly took a second job waiting tables at night after her administrative position at the local community college. Greg, who had been between opportunities again, scrambled to find full-time work and ended up taking a position at a home improvement store, a significant step down from his previous management role, but it was something. Bailey, perhaps, felt the change most acutely. Her expensive private soccer training was immediately cancelled. Her unlimited data plan downgraded to basic service once they managed to reactivate her phone. The new clothes and accessories she had taken for granted stopped appearing. For the first time in her life, she heard the word no when she asked for things. The kitchen renovation Kimberly had been so proud of sat half-finished, a constant reminder of what they had lost. They couldn't afford to complete it. Nor could they afford to hire someone to return it to its original state. Cabinets with no doors, exposed wiring where the new lighting was supposed to go. A space where a dishwasher should be, their house had become a monument to interrupted privilege. 3 months in, they held a garage sale. Selling off the accumulated luxuries of years, designer purses, golf clubs, electronics, the barely used exercise equipment that had been that year's essential purchase. The proceeds went to catching up on the most critical bills. 5 months after I left, they lost the house. The bank foreclosed after months of missed payments and failed promises to catch up. They moved into a small 3-bedroom apartment in a less desirable part of town, all they could afford on their combined new incomes. Bailey had to change schools, leaving behind the private academy with its state-of-the-art facilities for the local public school with its overcrowded classrooms and outdated textbooks. Her friends, the ones who had laughed at my expense at her birthday party, gradually stopped including her in their social activities. Without the latest phone, the trendy clothes, the ability to go to the mall and spend freely, she found herself on the outside of the social circles she had once dominated. My parents downsized too, selling their house and moving into a senior living apartment complex that accepted their limited income. Dad continued working nights despite his doctor's warnings about the strain on his heart. Mom started selling hand-knitted items online to supplement their income. Through all of this, they continued searching for me. Kimberly called every hospital in Arizona. Greg checked homeless shelters. They filed reports with missing persons databases. They even hired a private investigator for a brief period before the costs became prohibitive. Bailey, in what Martin's sister described as a moment of genuine remorse, used her limited internet access to create a video that went modestly viral locally, a teary-eyed teenager apologizing to her missing uncle, begging him to come home, admitting that they had taken him for granted. "I didn't mean what I said," she cried into the camera. "We notice, Uncle Mason. We notice so much that it hurts every day. Please come back. I'm sorry." The video circulated enough to reach local news stations, which ran short segments on my disappearance. But without foul play suspected, and with the notarized letter making it clear I had left voluntarily, the story quickly faded from public interest. 6 months after I vanished, Bailey found my email address. Not the new one I had created, but my old personal account that I still checked occasionally through an anonymous VPN. She sent a message with the subject line, "We miss you more than you could ever know." The body of the email was simple. "Uncle Mason, I know what I said was horrible. I know we all treated you badly. I didn't understand how much you did for us until you were gone. Mom cries at night when she thinks I can't hear her. Dad is working all the time and looks so tired. Grandma and Grandpa had to sell their house. I'm not asking for money. I'm not asking for anything except to know that you're okay. I'm so sorry for what I said. I was stupid and spoiled and didn't realize how lucky I was to have an uncle who cared so much. Please just let me know you're alive. Please. I love you. I miss you. Bailey." The email sat in my inbox, unread for 3 days before I finally opened it. I stared at it for a long time, emotions churning, anger, vindication, guilt, longing. And somewhere beneath it all, a tentative hope. I closed the laptop without responding, but I didn't delete the message. That night, I dreamed of Arizona for the first time since leaving. Not the family drama or the financial burden, but the desert sunsets that painted the sky in impossible colors, the scent of creosote after a rare rain, the mountains silhouetted against the horizon. I woke with the taste of homesickness bitter on my tongue. The next day, as Jake and I worked through his algebra homework at my kitchen table, he asked me an unexpected question. "Do you have family, Mr. Mason?" I paused, pencil hovering above the equation we were solving. "Yes," I said finally. "But we're not in touch right now." He nodded with the simple acceptance of youth. "That's too bad. My dad's not around either. It sucks." I looked at this boy who had become an important part of my new life, bright, curious, resilient despite his challenges. I thought about Bailey's email waiting for a response. About the family that had taken so much but was now learning the hardest possible lessons about independence and consequences. "Sometimes," I said carefully, "people need space to figure things out. It doesn't mean they don't care." Jake considered this, then returned to his equation. "I guess. But sometimes people just need to know you're still there, even if you're mad at them." Out of the mouths of babes. That evening, I opened my laptop and began typing a reply to Bailey. 6 months into my new life in Portland, I had established what anyone observing might call stability. My job at the startup had evolved. I'd been promoted to lead developer after creating an inventory tracking algorithm that dramatically improved the product. My apartment now felt lived in. With books lining the shelves, a decent collection of vinyl records beside a vintage turntable, my one significant indulgence, and even a few plants thriving on the windowsills. I had something resembling a social circle, Martin across the hall, who invited me for chess and whiskey on Thursday evenings, Lisa and Jake from downstairs, who often included me in their Sunday dinners, a few colleagues from work who occasionally convinced me to join them for drinks after hours, the owner of the bookstore who set aside titles he thought I might enjoy. These connections were different from any I'd had before. They were balanced, reciprocal. I helped Jake with his studies. He kept an eye on my apartment when I traveled for work. I fixed Martin's perpetually troublesome laptop. He shared his extensive knowledge of literature and jazz. I brought technical expertise to work. My colleagues brought youthful energy and fresh perspectives. No one was using me as an ATM. No one took without giving. It was refreshing, healing. The email I'd sent to Bailey had been brief but honest. "Bailey, I'm alive and well. I needed to make a clean break to figure some things out. What happened wasn't just about your comment. It was years of feeling used rather than loved. I'm not ready to come back or reconnect fully. I need more time. But I wanted you to know that I'm safe. Take care, Uncle Mason." Her response had come within minutes, paragraphs of tearful gratitude just for knowing I was alive, followed by updates on the family. They had indeed lost the house. Greg was working 2 jobs now. Kimberly had taken online classes to improve her administrative qualifications. My parents were struggling but managing with community support. Bailey herself had gotten a weekend job at a local cafe to pay for her own phone plan. "Everything is different now," she wrote. "We all are. I know that doesn't fix what we did. But I wanted you to know." I didn't reply immediately, unsure what to say or how much to reveal about my new life. But a week later, I sent another short message acknowledging her update and asking how she was adjusting to her new school. Thus began a cautious, intermittent correspondence, never more than once a week. Focused primarily on her life rather than mine, careful to avoid both recriminations and requests. Through Bailey, I learned bits and pieces about the rest of the family. Greg had stopped drinking entirely, unable to afford the habit, and needing to stay sharp for his early morning shifts. Kimberly had started a small side business doing virtual assistant work, applying skills she developed in her administrative job. My father's health had suffered from the physical demands of his night security position, but he'd recently found a daytime job as a school crossing guard that better suited his age and condition. They were adapting, surviving. Part of me felt guilty for forcing this harsh transition upon them. A larger part recognized it as necessary growth that should have happened years ago. One rainy Tuesday in November, as I walked home from work under the shelter of my umbrella, I passed the community center with a sign advertising a coat drive for local families in need. Without hesitation, I stepped inside and made a donation, enough to purchase 20 new winter coats for children who would otherwise go without. The volunteer who processed my contribution asked if I wanted a receipt for tax purposes or if I wanted my name included in their donor acknowledgments. "No," I said. "Anonymous is fine." It felt good to give freely, without obligation or expectation. In the months that followed, I found myself making similar anonymous donations to various causes around Portland, funding for the public library's after-school program, contributions to the food bank, support for a shelter that housed families in transition. I didn't tell Bailey about these donations. They weren't meant to prove anything to anyone but myself, that I could be generous without being exploited, that giving could be a choice rather than an expectation. In April, nearly a year after my disappearance, Bailey sent an email that broke our unspoken pattern. "Uncle Mason, I graduate from middle school next month. I know it's a lot to ask, but is there any chance you might come? No one knows I've been emailing you, not even Mom, so you wouldn't have to worry about being ambushed. I just thought maybe you could sit in the back and leave before anyone notices you're there. I'd just like to know you were watching, even for a little while. I understand if you can't, or don't want to, but I had to ask. Love, Bailey." Attached was an official invitation to the graduation ceremony. My finger hovered over the delete button, but something stopped me from pressing it. Instead, I closed the email without responding and went for a long walk along the eastern promenade, watching the waves crash against the rocky shore as I turned the request over in my mind. Could I return, even briefly, to the place and people I'd left behind? Was I strong enough to maintain the boundaries I'd established? Was I healed enough to face them without falling back into old patterns? I didn't have answers, but the questions themselves revealed how far I'd come. A year ago, I wouldn't have considered returning under any circumstances. Now, at least, it was a possibility worth contemplating. That night I sat at my desk with a notepad, making 2 columns. Reasons to go, and reasons to stay away. Under the first, I wrote things like, show Bailey I care about her milestones, and see firsthand how the family has changed. Under the second, risk of falling back into financial support role, and potential emotional manipulation. The list grew evenly until I wrote one final entry under reasons to go. Because I'm no longer afraid of them or what they might ask of me. That, I realized, was the crux of it. In Portland, I had rebuilt not just my life but my sense of self-worth. I had established healthy boundaries with new connections. I had learned to say no without guilt. I had discovered who Mason Thompson was outside of his role as the family provider. The next morning, I booked a flight to Arizona. The desert heat hit me like a physical force as I stepped out of the airport terminal. After a year in Portland's mild coastal climate, Arizona's intensity felt foreign yet intimately familiar, like running into an old friend who had both changed and remained exactly the same. I had rented a modest sedan. Nothing flashy that might draw attention. The graduation ceremony wasn't until tomorrow, giving me time to settle into my hotel and prepare mentally for what would be a complicated reunion. Even if observed from a distance, Bailey still didn't know I was coming. I hadn't responded to her email, unwilling to make a promise I might not keep if my courage failed at the last minute. But here I was, driving through the sun-baked streets of a city I had once called home, feeling like both a native and a tourist. My hotel was on the opposite side of town from where my family now lived, a deliberate choice to minimize accidental encounters. After checking in, I spent the afternoon by the pool, watching families splash and play while contemplating the journey that had brought me back here. That evening, curiosity got the better of me. I drove past my old apartment complex, surprised by how small and unremarkable it looked now. I cruised slowly by the house my family had lost, now sporting fresh paint and a landscaped yard courtesy of its new owners. I even passed the senior living facility where my parents had relocated, its stucco exterior glowing pink in the sunset. I didn't stop at any of these places. I wasn't ready for direct contact. Just reconnecting with the geography of my former life. The middle school auditorium was already filling with families when I arrived the next morning, 15 minutes before the ceremony was scheduled to begin. I slipped in through a side entrance and found a seat in the back corner, partially obscured by a support column, visible enough to see the stage but unlikely to be noticed in the crowd. The ceremony was typical middle school graduation fare, speeches from the principal and valedictorian, a slightly out-of-tune performance by the school band, the calling of names as students crossed the stage to receive their certificates. I tensed when the announcer reached the T's, scanning the line of students for my niece. Bailey Thompson, the principal called, and there she was, walking across the stage. She looked different than I remembered, taller of course, but also less polished. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail rather than the elaborate style she'd favored before. She wore the standard blue graduation gown with no additional accessories beyond the Honor Society cord around her neck. The entitled girl who had casually dismissed me at her birthday party had been replaced by a more serious young woman who had learned some difficult lessons about life. As she accepted her certificate, her eyes scanned the audience, pausing briefly on the back corner where I sat. I couldn't tell if she had spotted me, but I raised my hand slightly just in case. After the ceremony, I remained in my seat as families surged forward to congratulate their graduates. From my vantage point, I could see Kimberly and Greg making their way to Bailey, my parents following more slowly behind. They looked older, more worn. Greg's designer polo shirts had been replaced by a simple button-down that had seen better days. Kimberly's previously highlighted hair was now its natural brown with noticeable gray strands she no longer colored away. They embraced Bailey with genuine pride, taking photos with a phone several generations older than the one I'd gifted her a year ago. My father leaned heavily on a cane I hadn't seen before. My mother dabbed at tears with a tissue. I was about to slip out unnoticed when Bailey suddenly broke away from her family and scanned the receding crowd. Her eyes locked on mine, and her face transformed with recognition and disbelief. Before I could react, she was rushing toward me, dodging between departing families. "Uncle Mason?" she called loud enough that heads turned, including those of her parents and my parents. "Uncle Mason!" She crashed into me with the full-body hug of a child, though she now reached my shoulder. "You came! You really came! I can't believe it!" I awkwardly returned the hug, aware that my family had spotted us and was approaching with expressions ranging from shock to tentative hope. "I got your invitation," I said simply. "Congratulations on graduating with honors. I didn't know if you'd see it, or care. But you came." She was crying now, still clinging to me as if I might disappear again. Kimberly reached us first, stopping a respectful distance away, uncertainty in every line of her body. "Mason? Is it really you?" I gently disengaged from Bailey's embrace and straightened up, facing my sister for the first time in a year. "Hello, Kimberly. You look good," she said, taking in my appearance. I had changed physically. The regular walks in Portland and absence of constant stress had trimmed me down. My wardrobe had evolved too, reflecting the more relaxed East Coast aesthetic I'd adopted. "Thank you," I replied. "You look—" I paused, unwilling to lie but not wanting to be cruel. "Like you've been working hard." She nodded, a flush of shame coloring her cheeks. "We have been. All of us." She hesitated, then added, "We've learned a lot since you left." By now, Greg and my parents had joined us, creating an awkward semicircle in the rapidly emptying auditorium. The air between us felt charged with unspoken words, Apologies, explanations, accusations, regrets. My father broke the silence. Son, he said, his voice thinner than I remembered. We thought we'd never see you again. That was the original plan, I admitted. I came for Bailey's graduation. I wasn't planning on a family reunion. Will you at least let us buy you lunch? My mother asked, then quickly amended. I mean, join us for lunch. We're going to that diner Bailey likes. Nothing fancy. The clarification wasn't lost on me. They weren't asking me to pay. It was a small thing, but significant. I looked at Bailey, whose hopeful expression made my decision for me. Lunch, I agreed. Just lunch. The diner was crowded but casual. The kind of place where no one would notice or care about the emotional drama unfolding at our corner booth. We ordered simple meals, burgers, sandwiches, salads, and then faced the impossible task of condensing a year's worth of absence into conversation. Where have you been living? Greg asked, breaking the ice. Portland, I said. Maine. Not Oregon. Do you like it there? Bailey asked eagerly. I do. It's different. Quieter. The people are. I searched for the right word. Genuine. And work? Are you still in software? My father inquired. I nodded. Smaller company, different focus. The pay is less, but it's fulfilling. We looked for you, Kimberly said abruptly. Hired a private investigator until we couldn't afford it anymore. Called hospitals. Filed reports. I know, I said. I didn't make it impossible to find me. Just difficult enough to ensure it was a choice to contact me, not an accident. Why did you leave like that? My mother asked, pain evident in her voice. A note and all those receipts. Nothing else. I took a deep breath, considering my words carefully. I left because I realized I'd become nothing more than a financial resource to this family. The receipts weren't meant as an invoice. They were evidence of a pattern none of you seemed to recognize or care about. Silence fell over the table, heavy with recognition. We cared about you. My father protested weakly. Not just the money. Did you? I challenged gently. When was the last time any of you asked about my life? My hopes? My struggles? When did anyone ever offer to help me with anything? No one had an answer. The hardest part wasn't the money. I continued. It was knowing that if I disappeared, as Bailey so accurately quoted from her mother, no one would notice. Except you did notice, didn't you? Not because I was gone, but because the money was. Kimberly flinched as if I'd slapped her. That comment was inexcusable. I was frustrated and venting to Greg. I never thought Bailey was listening, and I certainly never expected her to repeat it. But you said it, I pointed out. And you thought it. And on some level, you believed it. I was wrong, she admitted, tears welling in her eyes. So wrong. I didn't realize how much we all leaned on you until everything fell apart. Bailey, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly spoke up. We lost everything, Uncle Mason. The house, the cars. Even my stupid phone. But you know what? We're okay. Better, actually. She looked at her parents. Mom and Dad talk to each other now. Like really talk, not just about bills and stuff. Grandma and Grandpa come over for dinner every Sunday, and we all cook together instead of ordering takeout. I looked at her with new appreciation. You've grown up a lot in a year. She nodded solemnly. I had to. We all did. Greg cleared his throat. Mason, I know we can never repay what you did for us over the years. And I'm not asking you to come back and rescue us again. We're managing. It's tight, but we're making it work. We just miss you. My mother added. Not your money. You. I studied their faces, looking for signs of manipulation or insincerity. Instead, I saw only exhaustion, humility, and cautious hope. I'm not moving back, I said firmly. My life is in Portland now. I have a job I care about, friends who value me for who I am. Not what I can provide. We understand, Kimberly said, though disappointment shadowed her eyes. But, I continued, I'm willing to stay in touch. Emails, phone calls. Maybe visits occasionally. Bailey brightened immediately. Really? You mean it? On one condition. I stipulated. No financial requests. Not for emergencies, not for special occasions, not for anything. The moment money enters the equation again, I'm gone, permanently this time. They all nodded, even my father, who had always found it easiest to express love through asking for practical help. And I'd like to get to know you all again, I added. Not as people I support, but as family. Real family, who give and take in equal measure. Lunch stretched into the afternoon as we began the delicate process of re-establishing connections on new terms. It wasn't easy, old habits threatened to surface several times. Particularly when my mother mentioned her medication costs, or when Kimberly referenced Bailey's upcoming high school expenses. But each time, they caught themselves redirecting the conversation away from money and back to genuine sharing. By the time we parted, we had established a framework for moving forward. I would return to Portland the next day as planned. We would start with weekly video calls, first just with Bailey, then gradually including others as our comfort levels increased. Perhaps at Christmas, I might visit again. Or they could come to Portland if they saved for the trip themselves. It wasn't a Hollywood reunion with tearful embraces and instant forgiveness. It was tentative, cautious, and realistic, which made it far more likely to succeed in the long term. That night, back in my hotel room, I sent an email to Martin letting him know I'd survived the family encounter and would be returning as scheduled. I messaged Lisa to confirm I'd be available for Jake's science fair presentation next week. I checked in with my team at work about a project deadline. These simple actions reinforced what I had learned over the past year. I was more than a provider. I was a friend, a mentor, a colleague, a neighbor. I was Mason Thompson, complete in myself. Valuable beyond my financial contributions, worthy of balanced relationships. The next morning, as my plane lifted off from Arizona soil, I felt no regret about leaving again. This time, though, I also felt no anger. Only a quiet certainty that whatever happened with my family going forward, whether we successfully rebuilt our relationships or eventually drifted apart again, the decision would be made consciously. With eyes wide open on all sides. Sometimes disappearing is the only way to be seen clearly. Sometimes silence is necessary to make room for new, healthier conversations. And sometimes, the greatest gift you can give yourself and others is the courage to establish boundaries that protect your worth as a human being, not just as a resource. So what about you? Have you ever had to make a difficult choice to protect your own well-being? Have you experienced being taken for granted by those closest to you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Remember, setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's essential for genuine relationships to flourish. Thank you for listening to my journey. And may you find the strength to value yourself as much as you value others.